The agenda for this module is as follows. First, I'll define what we mean by job analysis. Then we'll talk about what do people do at work. Then I'll review some key terminology, things like KSAOs. Huh? What? Don't worry, we'll get there. And we'll also talk about elements, tasks, positions, and jobs, and be able to differentiate among them. By the end of this module, you should be able to define what we mean by the term job analysis, really understand what a job analysis is all about, describe the primary purposes for conducting a job analysis. Why do we do this? Why do we care about it? What is the focus of a job analysis in industrial organizational psychology? And lastly, you should be able to explain the importance of being very, very specific about what people do at work. I'm going to caution you. Job analysis may not be the absolute most exciting work that we do in industrial psychology. I really want to apologize if it is something that you find that you really do enjoy and that you don't find it to be too dry. But I just want to give you a heads up that it's a little bit, in my opinion, it's one of the drier topics we're going to be talking about this semester, but it is also one of the absolutely most critical, important steps. Why is that? The process of, let me back up. A job analysis is the process of defining a job in terms of the component tasks or duties. In other words, we're really focused on what do people do at work and really breaking jobs down into their component parts. Stepping back for a minute, industrial psychology focuses on a number of important activities at work. We focus on how to recruit the right people for jobs, how to select or choose the right people and get the best fitting employee in that position, how to evaluate performance and conduct performance appraisals, or perhaps develop a performance management system, or figure out how we're going to train workers to do their jobs. In order to perform any of those activities, we really need to understand very, very clearly what a job involves. In other words, before we can try and pick the right person for the job, we really need to understand, well, what is it that somebody's going to be doing? What's required of them? What characteristics does somebody have to have in order to be successful? Job analysis is the fundamental process underlying this, and it is the process by which we figure out all this stuff of what people do at work. There are a lot of different ways that we can go about conducting a job analysis. We're going to later on in one of the subsequent steps or modules embedded within Module 3, I promise we're going to be talking about lots of different methods of job analysis. But altogether, what we're doing is gathering information about a job's components, characteristics, and requirements to understand what people do. So in general, a job analysis provides information on a couple different things. Remember that we're in psychology, and in psychology we talk about behavior. So perhaps it's not surprising that in job analysis we want to think about what behavior does this job require? What behavior is a worker doing on the job? And secondly, what kind of person is successful in this job? In other words, what are the characteristics of the person that are needed to succeed in the job? Central to job analysis are what we call KSAOs. KSAOs is an abbreviation or acronym for knowledge, skills, abilities, and other characteristics. In many ways, we have a tendency to lump these together all as one thing and just refer to them as KSAOs and not differentiate between what is knowledge versus what is a skill versus what is an ability compared to some other characteristic. But to be clear, knowledge, skills, and abilities are not necessarily all the same thing. Knowledge refers to our theoretical or practical understanding of a concept. Skills refer to proficiencies that are gained through experience or training. Abilities refer to qualities of being able to do something. One way to differentiate skills and abilities is that one tends to be more learned or can be learned, whereas the other is more innate. Which do you think is which? Which is more likely to be learned, skills or abilities? If you guess skills, I would agree with you. Skills as proficiencies that we can gain through experience or training are things that often can be learned or can be taught. Abilities, on the other hand, might be something that we're born with. For example, general cognitive ability or mental ability is something that we know from prior research has been shown to be somewhat hereditary. And there are many other physical abilities and many other abilities that aren't things that can necessarily be trained. Other terminology that is central to job analysis includes breaking jobs down into different components, including elements, tasks, positions, and jobs. As listed here, the element is really the smallest unit of a work activity. It's breaking a job down into the most basic part of what a job really entails. Let's think about, let's take, for example, being a student. Certainly that's something that you're probably familiar with. If the general task that you're focused on, in other words, a work activity that you're trying to do to perhaps meet a course objective, if your task is to write a paper, an example of an element might be open a Microsoft Word document. Another element might be saving the file with a particular file name. Then the task is writing a paper. Your position might be as a third-year undergraduate student, or maybe you're a fourth-year student, or maybe a second year. And the job, as a collection of positions that are generally similar, is that you can think of yourself as a college student. So let's try just another quick example. Let's think about a job of a bartender, where the position might be a head bartender, the person in charge on the shift. Tasks that a bartender might do include serving drinks to customers. And elements that make up the task of serving drinks to customers may include checking the identification to make sure that a customer is of age. A second one might be writing down the drink order so that the bartender is sure to get the drink order right. Here is a visual example for the job of an administrative assistant, where here you can see the job of an administrative assistant is broken down. So there are two people in the position, Joe in position 1, Ellen in position 2. And Joe and Ellen each perform some tasks that are similar, such as typing documents, but then they have some different tasks where Joe manages a calendar, whereas Ellen has a task requirement of distributing mail. And then you can see the elements that are comprised of breaking the task down into its most basic parts. There are many, many reasons why we conduct a job analysis in industrial psychology. Many of these activities are going to be things that you'll have experience with during this course, especially in the lab in Psychology 441. Examples of why we would conduct a job analysis include being able to create a job description. Think about if you were to apply for a job and you see a job posting or a job ad, that's where the job description may come from. It might be to develop a job classification system so the organization can understand how the jobs are linked to one another and how they're structured, or it could be useful for determining pay or compensation and the basis by which people should be compensated depending on their position within the organization. A job analysis can also be used to identify what competencies, or here we go again with the KSAOs, what knowledge, skills, abilities, or other characteristics are needed for personnel selection. Another purpose that we'll talk about this semester or in this term is conducting a needs assessment for training. Although we'll talk about it more when we get to training, a critical component to designing a training program is determining whether training is needed, and if so, what are the training needs? What are the gaps in the knowledge, skills, abilities, and characteristics that workers need to perform their job effectively? We can't really develop a training program unless we really understand what we need to train on, which comes full circle back to understanding the job. And importantly, in talking about how we define performance, what constitutes performance in the job, and how to develop appropriate methods of performance appraisal, again, to do that most effectively, we really need to understand what the job is all about. At this point, I'd like you to just do a little activity and think about what are the knowledge, skills, abilities, and other characteristics that you think are needed to be a successful student at CSU. I'd suggest that maybe you pause here and jot these down, although I'm going to go ahead and advance the slides at this point. So that concludes our unit at this point in Module 3 for the Introduction to Job Analysis. In the next segment, I'll be discussing methods of job analysis. Thank you.